Today, for this production presentation, I'm going to be talking about and comparing three Led Zeppelin albums. Led Zeppelin 2, which was released in 1969, Led Zeppelin 4, which was released in 1971, and Houses of the Holy, which was released in 1973. I'll be comparing recording techniques, musical styles, and production techniques. First, I'm going to talk about the recording processes for each of the three albums. Led Zeppelin 2, each song was recorded separately while they were on tour. It was recorded, mixed, and produced separately, and they recorded at various studios in the UK, in North America, and they would do things like record beds in London, they would go to New York, and they would do overdubs while they were there. They might do more overdubs in Vancouver, and then mix back in New York, and they would do something live that they liked, and they would try to capture it in the studio shortly after and book some studio time. This recording process created a vibe of spontaneity and urgency. Led Zeppelin 4 was recorded in a very different way. They started recording at Island Records in London, but they felt they needed a more relaxed environment, so they moved to Headley Grange, a remote Victorian house in East Hampshire, England. And they used the Rolling Stones mobile studio for this. They wanted a place where they could have a cup of tea and wander around the garden, and they could record when they were in the right mood to capture the kind of vibe that they wanted. Some of their tracks were made up on the spot because they had all the time that they needed, and they had a more relaxed approach. This was a very different process compared to Led Zeppelin 2. Houses of the Holy was recorded at 3 different studios throughout spring of 1972. They used the Rolling Stones mobile studio at Stargroves, Berkshire County estate owned by Mick Jagger. They also recorded at Olympic Studios and Electric Lady Studios, and it wasn't quite as hectic as Led Zeppelin 2, but it wasn't quite as relaxed as Led Zeppelin 4. Next, I'm going to be talking about the musical styles between the three albums. Led Zeppelin 2 is the heaviest album, and it's riff-based and super groovy, but also super weird. It'll go between really groovy and really weird, like in Whole Lotta Love, and in Moby Dick it's really groovy and then has an extended drum solo. It's very blues influenced, like in the Lemon Song, and I'm going to play a few short clips to demonstrate the bluesiness in the Lemon Song and the grooviness and weirdness of Whole Lotta Love.
You need cooling, baby, I'm not fooling. I'm gonna send you back to schooling.
Led Zeppelin 4 had influence from blues, rock, folk, and a lot of epic guitar orchestrations. There's lots of bluesy guitar solos. I'll play a few short clips to demonstrate the bluesiness and guitar orchestrations and elements of metal in Black Dog, bluesiness and rock and roll, folksiness and folk influence in Going to California.
Make a new start, going to California with an aching in my heart.
Next, I'm going to be talking about Houses of the Holy, which is a departure from the blues influence. The guitar solos are more folk influenced, and it features stylistic influences that they hadn't had in the past. Some examples are their reggae influence, in Dire Maker, the James Brown tribute, which is the crunge, is more funky, and the atmospheric and psychedelic influence in No Quarter. So I'll play short clips of each of these as well.
Snow drives by the foot slow. The dogs of doom are howling.
Next, I will be talking about the production techniques in these three albums. Led Zeppelin 2 uses a lot of crazy effects and panning. It's very experimental, and they do a lot of panning of the vocals and guitar with them changing sides. There's an example of this in Whole Lotta Love and in What Is and What Should Never Be. In Led Zeppelin 4, they also use changes in panning and lateral imaging. For example, in the levee breaks, there's changes in panning with the guitar, and there's layers coming in and out. They also used the effect, a backwards echo effect on the harmonica, which is where they put the echo ahead of the sound. They recorded the song at a different tempo, and then they slowed it down to create a sludgy effect. And they used panning to create a spiraling effect to make it sound like the band is spiraling around Robert Plant, and also had phasing in the vocals. Next, I'm going to talk about Houses of the Holy. They layered a lot of different production techniques on this album. One example of this is No Quarter, where Jimmy Page used vari-speed to drop the whole song down a semitone. This gave it a more moody and intense feel. They also had a very compressed guitar track. And the other song that I wanted to talk about on this album was Over the Hills and Far Away, and specifically the effect of the band being far away and coming closer towards the end of the song.